Peace to the saints, the millions in attendance worldwide. So many times I heard people speak of Bill Gates and I brushed it off as conspiracy theory, thinking, hey, I'm a business guy and I'm in technology. People could say the same thing about me. Sure, I don't have $1 billion like Bill, but I figured this is conspiracy theory. Bill's probably a very intelligent, well-intentioned gentleman. But then I started to see some news clippings from legitimate, mainstream, even liberal media, MSNBC, Forbes. And I thought, oh, gee golly, Bill Gates might be up to something. So I decided to do a little bit of reading, and I stumbled upon something that's very concerning, something that you should all be, in fact, worried about. Bill Gates is attempting to do something called solar geoengineering. And in this case, that means that he's seeking to create a massive chemical cloud that will essentially block out sun rays to dim and cool the earth. Now, you might say to yourself, whoa, Marquett, that sounds strange. That doesn't sound organic. What do you mean, dim and cool the earth? And who elected Bill Gates to do that? When was that vote? I didn't get to vote on that. Neither did I, Saints. The concerning thing is that the research currently being conducted has not only proven that, yeah, sure, there's a possibility that this may indeed cool the earth. And why do we think that? Because in 1991, there was a volcanic eruption, Pinatubo, and as a result of that volcanic eruption and sulfur dioxide particles being spewed into the atmosphere, about 2% of light was blocked from coming into the earth. So that occurred in June of 91. And then in 92, the earth overall was cooler. And so the understanding among scientists is that, yes, volcanic eruptions and this gray, hazy cloud they put into the air, into the stratosphere through sulfur dioxide particles, we can recreate that. But the question is, can you recreate that in a controlled and safe way? Well, I doubt it. And I'll tell you why I doubt it. Number one, human beings are woefully imperfect. And scientists, though they're really good at some things, they're not always good at predicting the outcomes of some of the chemicals they chef up. For example, there's something called forever chemicals, popularized by the DuPont company that made your skillets non-stick. They made your carpets stain-free, and they had protectants you could spray on your clothes to prevent staining. And then it turns out years later, this stuff causes cancer and all kinds of bad things, testicular cancer, which is one of the worst, and all sorts of things that bring you death. So let's talk a little bit more about Bill Gates. The curious thing is that he's actually partnered with Harvard to do this experiment, and the project is called Scope X. Now, you might say, well, Harvard, that's a reputable institution. Maybe we should trust it. Well, it turns out that if you're doing something that's going to alter the world, of course, the leading academic institutions want their name associated with this big, global, far-reaching project. Oh, absolutely. And it's going to be on the bleeding edge of environmental technology. So surely there'll be some money in it. And surely you want your name, recorded in the annals of history saying, we saved the world. Oh, absolutely. But here's the challenge is that maybe you won't save the world. Maybe you'll actually disrupt the world and pop off World War III. Why do I say that? If Bill Gates is successful in leading the march to create a chemical cloud, a gray cloud around the entire planet Earth, which will block out a significant percentage of light, thereby dimming the planet Earth and cooling it, it may also cause mass drought, which means that you won't get the water for your crops. And when you have mass drought, you also have mass famine, which is starvation and death. And then in addition, you might also have mass flooding in other parts of the world that probably were not prepared for flooding because their climate has been fairly consistent. And if it did change, it changed over time instead of so abruptly which is what would happen if they disturbed the natural processes in the stratosphere with this unnatural injection of trillions of light reflecting particles. Oh, and by the way, do scientists know which chemicals they're going to use to create these unnatural light reflecting particles? They have not a clue currently. In fact, they still need to develop technology to create the aircraft that can fly at a high enough altitude to disperse the trillions of particles needed to create this effect. They also have to design the nozzles to spew out trillions of these unnatural chemicals that are man-made. Oh, now you might say, well, Marquette, did the whole planet Earth get together and say, gee, Bill, we think you're plenty swell and plenty smart. No one voted for you, but apparently you've elected yourself. And apparently there was a meeting I wasn't invited to. They didn't invite Marquette Devon Burton to this meeting. And in that meeting, you said, gee, according to my calculations, we ought to just create a big cloud around the whole planet Earth and block out the sun. That'll reduce the warming. And all the yes men in there said, gee, that sounds like a great idea. Now, if I was in that meeting, I feel like as soon as he said that, I said, hold on. I would have started moving furniture and I'd have to take my shirt off. Like, we got to throw hands, bruh. You're not about to create one big cloud around the planet Earth because last I checked, apparently God said, let there be light. And Bill Gates was like, no, too much light. Let there be less light. Here's the challenge. If their experiment is to be made real and it follows their simulations, the computer modeling suggests that it will cause weakening of monsoons in China, India, and Africa, thereby disturbing the ecology there and the ability to produce food. And as I said, mass famine, mass flooding, mass drought. But it would also make China warmer and drier. It would make India cooler and wetter. And those countries did not sign off on this, which should give you an indication that if Bill Gates is going to do this without permission of those countries or even permission of his own country, this could cause some problems. Now, what I wouldn't be surprised of is if a righteous person stood up and said, well, there's a movie called Romeo Must Die. Well, he's not the only one. You dig? Because as has been mentioned in the comments, certainly this is evil. Undoubtedly, this is a man who is so arrogant that he thinks he can not only play God, he can undo the work of God. And I'm not a religious guy. I'm not here to talk religion to you. But it is curious that, in the religious text, they generally say things like, I, God, am all-knowing, all-seeing. Well, Bill Gates is purporting to be all-powerful and all-knowing, even though they've not developed the proper chemicals they can use to be light reflecting in the atmosphere and also still not damaging to the earth. He still thinks he's all-knowing and that he can predict what's going to happen when the scientists are clearly in disagreement as to the good effects as well as the cons of the experiment. Now, here's the worst part. Check this out. Do you know that if they were to do this experiment, there would be no more blue skies? Such an experiment would reduce the likelihood of you seeing a blue sky because you would have all these chemicals creating a hazy whiteness in the sky because it's in the stratosphere coming on down to you. I find that to be quite disturbing. And I also find it strange. I don't know if you've ever been at home with your spouse or your family. It's kind of hard sometimes. Maybe you're warm, your girlfriend's cold, or vice versa. Me, I can never really get on the other person's, thermostat level. And I'm just thinking, who elected Bill Gates to set the global planetary thermostat? That's actually quite a radical, insane idea. I didn't elect him. I think we ought to do something about him. Seems like he's getting a little bit too big for his britches. Further, I think the basics of climate change still have yet to be explained to the population in a way that they can understand. Whereas you find very young liberals, even a 16-year-old girl named Greta Thunberg or something like that, Greta something. She's really just a puppet. There's older people who are using her as a tool. And I think it's quite sad that we should instrumentalize children. The likelihood that she understands the complex scientific causes of global climate change is highly unlikely. And the idea that a teenage girl would be a world revolutionary, it just doesn't quite add up. But anyways, I say that to say, How is it that we're ready to jump to this big conclusion when an average person does not even understand why we're seeing more fires in the rainforest in Brazil? If you ask the average person and they say, oh, it's global climate change, and then you dig a little bit deeper and you say, okay, well, because it's global warming and the forest in Brazil is dry, just because a tree is dry, does that mean it just spontaneously bursts into flames because it's dry? Because I know a lot of people with really dry lips, they look like this guy's lips are going to burst into flames any moment, but it never happens. Does it just burst into flames like just all of a sudden? I say that to point out the fact that most people don't understand climate change, even those who are very adamant about stopping global warming. Now, remember, the terminology has changed because for a time it was known as global warming, and then there were inconsistencies and they changed it to global climate change. Well, here's the reality. In the past, there have been significant swings in global temperature, ice ages, in fact. What is certain is that the climate does change, things do change. That is the nature of life. But what is not proper is for a single man or even a small minority of people to try to decide the fate of the planet, especially without them being duly elected. That is what concerns me. And it's important today that not only some of the people on the margins who have been shouting about Bill Gates for a long time, but people like myself who are part of the mainstream now need to become aware of this and take action, because this is deeply concerning that even such experiments should go on. Forget actually implementing this. They should have to get approval to do such radical experimentation. I mean, it's quite outrageous. And further, the idea that you would get the entire, 200 something countries to all agree on this is highly unlikely, which shows that surely some people's rights will be trampled on in the process of these billionaires and these wicked controllers of men to try to get their way. By the way, I hope you all appreciate these topics that I do. A lot of your favorite YouTubers, the best they can do is talk about women, which really should be the least of your focus points. Dominic writes, what are your thoughts on the importance of resources to leverage for more options, and if more options offer better outcomes on average? So there are things called options, like meaning like a financial vehicle, like you can trade options. I don't think you're talking about that in terms of finance. But if you're talking about just in general in life, having more options, I don't think that's necessary. In fact, today I decided that when I talk to people, I'm going to tell them to pick one goal. I used to say pick one financial goal and pick one people related goal for relationships and things like that. But I find that generally speaking, the human being is fairly incompetent, fairly inconsistent. And to make things simple so that you can actually achieve it and you don't feel overwhelmed, you should pick one goal. So simplicity is key and prioritization is key. So you should pick one goal. Options usually cause paralysis, which is you have your attention split too many places or there are too many things to consider. Simplicity is always best. If you can go with one, I always say make your next move your best move. Put all of your money on your best horse. And if that horse underperforms, find a new horse. So options is not the key to life. The key to life is, putting your money on your best horse and putting all your time, focus, attention, and maintenance into that proper opportunity instead of looking all over trying to do multiple things at once. We're in an era of specialization. You see, the specialists get the highest compensation. A general doctor, they get decent money, but a surgeon gets better money, and a neurosurgeon gets even better money. Jabri writes, they move fast on this before cancer. Oh man, I'm telling you, bruh. It's like they're trying to get this done behind the scenes without anyone knowing. And the funny thing is, with DuPont having those forever chemicals in our cookware and in our plastic bottles that we drink from and all of these places before they revealed the ramifications of us being in contact with these chemicals, they've made billions and they are not healing anyone or paying anyone's medical bills, and the government's not protecting us, which is why I reiterate often that the government is wicked and you should be cautious and thoughtful about them. And shout out to all the saints who support my work. Truly appreciate you all. Well, it looks like we're all wrapped up. We're going to go ahead and end this the way we always end this, with the Creed of the Assassin. Repeat after me, knowing that this is true of you. The Creed of the Assassin. I am going to be who I truly am because I am remarkable. And I'm going to strive every moment to show the greatest part of who I am. Until next time.